Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Importance of Implementing Summer EBT in 2024, hosted by the Food Research and Action Center. I'm Steve Hayward, Communications Manager at FRAC. Before we begin, I'd like to cover a few brief housekeeping items. We expect this webinar to run about 30 minutes. We are recording the presentation and will send the recording and slides in a follow-up email. Closed captioning is available. To turn captions on, select Show Captions, it's the CC button in the bottom taskbar, and choose English as the spoken language. At the end of the presentation, there will be time for questions and answers. To ask a question, please use the Q&A tab in the bottom taskbar. With that, I'll pass it off to Kelsey Boone, Senior Child Nutrition Policy Analyst at FRAC. Take it away, Kelsey.
Thanks, Steve. Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I am just going to briefly go over today's agenda. We have a lot to do and only 30 minutes to do it, so we're just going to get right into it. So I'm going to do a brief introduction to Summer EBT, and then we're going to turn to Lauren Bauer from the Brookings Institute to talk through some of the lessons learned and data from the pandemic EBT program and how that helps inform how important the Summer EBT program coming up is. And then we're going to hear some state perspectives. So we've been lucky enough to have representatives from the California Department of Social Services join us to talk through what they're thinking about when it comes to Summer EBT, as well as the Michigan Department of Education. So a lot to do. And then I will be facilitating a Q&A at the end and go over some resources from FRAC. So next slide. So Summer EBT, as most of you probably know, is a new permanent and nationwide program that states must opt into. It provides $40 per child per month, adjusted for inflation, on an EBT card for groceries. And it is a complement to the summer nutrition program. So we see this as a way to fill the gaps that are left by the summer nutrition programs, and hope that it can help reduce some food insecurity for low-income households, particularly those with barriers to access. Next slide. So just some of the statutory requirements of the Summer EBT program that were written in the Consolidated Appropriations Act that came out in December. So states have to notify USDA by January 1st of each year that they plan to run the Summer EBT program, and they have to submit a administrative and management plan by February 15th of each year. Benefits have to be issued automatically with an option to opt out. An application must be made available for children not certified for free or reduced price meals during the school year. That is a little bit more flexible in summer of 2024, as USDA is allowing alternative application forms as well as other flexibilities just for summer of 2024 to get states up and running. Benefits have to be expunged after 4 months, and states must cover 50% of the summer EBT administrative expenses, which is a big barrier for many states, mostly because 100% of pandemic EBT administrative expenses were covered, which is a major change. So I'm going to hand it over to Lauren from Brookings Institute to talk through some of the data.
Thank you so much for having me. So sufficient nutrition in childhood sets the stage for a healthy life. The federal government invests billions of dollars each year to support child nutrition. Yet gaps in child nutrition program coverage, for example, historically during summer months, as well as implementation issues, continue to pose challenges for eliminating childhood hunger. Too many eligible children do not receive their nutrition assistance benefits, but many do. Before the pandemic, next slide, millions of children ate meals at school. Next slide. Following school closures, real-time evidence showed that food hardship increased immediately. Congress also immediately made substantial investments through nutrition assistance programs, including by introducing pandemic EBT for times when children were not in school. Next slide. Pandemic EBT was first authorized in March 2020 and rolled out across the US in subsequent months. Because states, rather than the federal government, administer most non-tax-based social insurance programs, states were responsible for implementing some of the most challenging COVID response policies. Under exceedingly difficult circumstances, states and their employees did heroic work across all the social insurance programs to provide support to families. In PEBT's first iteration, and in subsequent waves, states varied in how much time it took them to develop a plan to implement PEBT, gain approval from USDA, begin dispersing benefits to households that were already participating in SNAP, and begin dispersing benefits to eligible non-SNAP households. It took about a month for the first state to send benefits to families, and 20 weeks elapsed between when the first state and the last states began PEBT disbursements. Next slide. Once dispersed, it also took a bit of time for participants to figure out what the program was and then to spend the benefits. We find that Google searches for PEBT and related search terms peaked 3 weeks after disbursement. Redemptions of benefits stayed elevated between 1 and 5 weeks after disbursements. Next step. Slide, slash step. So in order to study the causal effect of PEBT on measures of food hardship and purchasing, we look at this variation of timing of the first PEBT disbursements across states. And for the states that are on the call, thank you for taking our calls that we've made 3 times to make sure we had the right information. Next slide. So what do we find? We found that food hardship fell between 39 and 42% 2 to 4 weeks after disbursement. There were also incredibly short-term impacts on mothers' mental health because we think that they just felt relieved that someone was paying attention to them. There were no effects on self-reported health or on the ability to pay for housing. Next slide. Grocery spending also increased, as we saw also that EBT redemptions increased, including a small but significant uptick in spending on perishables. So in sum, our evaluation of pandemic EBT shows that providing vouchers to families to purchase food reduces food hardship and to some extent changes what people put in their grocery cart. By its very nature, a permanent authorization of Summer EBT inherently addresses some of the obstacles experienced with pandemic EBT, especially predictability and consistency. In setting a predetermined voucher amount for summer months when schools are not in session, Summer EBT is much easier to administer, but of course I can say that from my office in DC. The permanent nature of this program also provides the opportunity to develop capacity, expertise, relationships, and data systems that will reduce the degree of difficulty at its onset and over time, lessening administrative costs and burdens. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Lauren. So just in sum of all of that data, coming out of the pandemic and out of the pandemic EBT program, we have really seen that this, as Lauren has shown, this program was had a big impact on families and food hardship. And in part of the pandemic EBT program was the summer EBT portion of that summer pandemic EBT program. So transitioning into this new permanent program, we expect to see similar trends on the impact of getting these benefits on food hardship and food insecurity. So it's really vital for families, especially with the end of the emergency allotments in March. Some states were before that, but the end of the emergency allotments really caused a big disruption to families' food benefits, and transitioning into next summer, having this continuity from the summer pandemic EBT program to the summer EBT program is going to be vital. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to our friends over at the California Department of Social Services.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I am Andrea Bravoy. I am Chief of CalFresh and Nutrition Branch here in California. CalFresh is what our term for SNAP in the state of California. So we're going to give a brief overview of our efforts in implementing Summer EBT in 2024. And I have our specialist here, Karen Mendieta, who has become the nutrition program child nutrition specialist for us. So we love her. She's going to give some really detailed information later on. Next slide, please. So today we're going to discuss our state legislation efforts, the collaboration model between us, Department of Social Services, as well as our Department of Education, as well as our budget and funding decisions and allocations that we have received so far. Next slide, please. So our state legislation. When Summer EBT was proposed in the Consolidated Appropriations Act, we were in the middle of our legislation and budget cycle. So we were able to tap in and seize an opportunity to get some things lined up and approved in statute. So we did two things. We passed Assembly Bill 120, which is for Human Services, which is for our side, Department of Social Services. And then we also passed Senate Bill 348, which is for pupil meals, which is for the Department of Education side. Collaboratively, you'll notice that the language is similar. It does designate us, California Department of Social Services, the SNAP agency, as the primary organization for this effort. But on the other side, in 348, you'll see that Department of Education is officially determined the partnering agency. So that works together hand in hand. A lot of the language also included things such as data sharing agreements and just identification of our collaboration, which we found that were some kind of problematic or burdensome nuances that we found in implementing pandemic EBT. So we were able to address those things in statute here. So again, just want to bring your eyes and attention to the fact that the lead agency is designated here, the partner agency is designated here, as well as any information used to share data between the two departments for the purposes of Summer EBT. So at this time, I'm going to hand it over to Karen, and she's going to walk you through the rest of our plans.
Thank you, Andrea. So we can go to the next slide. Thank you. I'll talk a little bit about our collaboration model between CDSS and the California Department of Education, also known as CDE. So as part of our collaboration with CDE, we did develop a work plan that separated requirements based on 5 objectives. And our first objective that we identified was initiating the program or pre-implementation. In order to clearly identify roles and responsibilities, we did meet with CDE early on to collaboratively identify who our stakeholders are so that we could begin a distribution list for when the time comes to start holding stakeholder meetings. And also really identifying what each person's responsibility was to fully execute this program. So the responsibilities between CDSS and CDE, as well as the individuals involved. Another important task was identifying what staffing resources and funding was needed. And like many other states, it has heavily relied on taking what we learned from PEBT to make estimates early on. And this work plan is a living document. So as we get more information from FNS and further develop the program, things are modified and updated as needed. And just to give a little bit of background on our objective for communication, because that's really big on making sure we communicate effectively with CDE and make sure we're on the same page. So our objective of communications largely focuses on identifying a project management site and setting regular meetings with CDE as well as with USDA FNS. And in response to this objective, we have created a routine of having weekly internal meetings with within CDSS, and also establishing bi-weekly meetings with CDE. And we've also started conversations with FNS on establishing monthly meetings where we can identify where support is needed and get clarification on any needed items. And as far as having a project management site for us, creating a SharePoint site where CDSS and CDE has access to it is what worked best for us, because it allows us to collaboratively make edits in real time to documents as needed and stores all vital program information in one space for both departments. I won't go through the entire work plan, but I'd be happy to share it if anyone is curious on getting a more in-depth look at our major tasks and activities. We did feel that this work plan has assisted us in determining the responsibilities of each department and creating topics of discussions to have productive meetings when we do meet bi-weekly. Next slide, please. Thank you. And as we developed what we wanted our collaboration to look like, we also created a Gantt chart that gives us a time frame to complete identified tasks so that we are all moving at the same pace. This is also a living document and changes as we identify other necessary tasks gathered from FNS guidance. This chart has also assisted us in creating visibility between both departments and clearly define timelines and deadlines, so we're all working at the same space, at the same pace. And as we receive further guidance from FNS, this will be modified or edited to include any information that we receive. As we know, we're supposed to be getting more information from FNS next month. Next slide, please. So when developing our budget and funding, again, as many states have done, we heavily relied on data from our final iteration of PEBT. For us, we called it PEBT 4.0. And this was used to estimate administrative costs specifically for summer 2024 summer EBT. The figures on this slide reflect our total administrative funding estimates. So the expectation is that automation will be 45 million, with half coming from federal funding and the other half coming from California's general fund. And our operations and administrative costs for 2024 are expected to be carved out of our original estimate, and we do anticipate to request a revised appropriation during our spring budget process. Next slide, please. Thank you. And with regards to state operations and administrative costs, our request for staffing does include 2 operations managers, and they would be responsible for the day-to-day operations of the program, including contracting, administration, and monitoring. And we also have requested 3 data positions to assist with the capturing and validating of data gathered by CDSS as well as CDE. Our administrative costs include outreach, and one of those anticipated costs is contracting with a vendor for a call center. We did use a call center for PEBT from 2021 through 2023, and we found that it was very useful, specifically with eligibility related questions. So we wanted to utilize that same call center to be able to assist with summer EBT questions, as we do anticipate that we'll be getting many questions as it's the first year that summer EBT will be implemented. And we heavily relied on the data gathered from PEBT call center to identify a rough estimate of about 15 million needed for the call center to run for the 2024 year. Next slide, please. And here we have the identified data sets for what we're planning on issuing out. So CDSS, along with CalSOS, which is our system used for determining eligibility, we plan to get the following data from CalSOS, so it'll come directly from CDSS. We'll be responsible for this data, and that includes all school-age children ages 4 to 18 who receive CalWORKS. So this is TANF only, CalFresh or SNAP only, those who receive a combination of TANF and SNAP, And we are a direct certification pilot state, so we are also able to gather Medi-Cal data for children who, so we are planning on identifying children who receive Medi-Cal, receive Medi-Cal at or under the 185% FPL. And CDE will be responsible for collecting data for students eligible for free and reduced price meals through the school meal application, through categorical eligibility, and through the state application. So for 2024 for California, we will be using the alternative income form, which is already used by schools, to be able to capture those children who are not already identified, such as those children that are attending CEP schools, so they're not automatically eligible, as Andrea had mentioned in the chat. So those children would need to submit an application, which for California for 2024, it'll be the alternative income form. And for our summer EBT communications, we do have an email. It's on the slide, but I can also put it in the chat. If you do have any questions, you want any clarification, or are interested on looking more in depth into any of the information that we provided, please do contact us. We're still learning along with all of you, but we're hoping that any information that we do already have that might be useful to you, that we'll be able to really relay that information and assist in any way we can. So thank you, everybody.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Just a reminder that if you have any questions, please place them in the Q&A function. We have been answering some questions in the chat, but more than happy to hold some of the questions and ask them at the end if we have time. So I'm going to pass it over to our friend from Michigan, Melanie.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I am Melanie Brumler. I am the Acting Assistant Director in the Office of Health and Nutrition Services at the Michigan Department of Education. I come from 20 years in our school nutrition programs, specifically at the department, and I was fortunate enough to be the main person that rolled out pandemic EBT from the department's side. So I'll get into how things will work for summer EBT, and it is mirroring pandemic EBT and how that worked in Michigan, and that will make sense in a few minutes. You can go on to the next slide. So why are we moving forward as quickly as possible to roll this out? A few things. We estimate that we have almost 1 million students, 900,000 students eligible based on pandemic EBT numbers the last few years. Summer EBT really supports our top 10 strategic education plans, specifically goal number 3. We want to improve the health, safety, and wellness of all learners, and this program providing this benefit in the summer just supports and complements our summer food service program. We also rolled out this past summer rural non-congregate within the summer food service program, but we still know there are pockets of kids, both rural and urban, that just access to food is an issue. So it is important to us, the Department of Education, our partners at the Department of Health and Human Services, and the governor, to make sure that students have access to food. Next slide, please. So yeah, just like stated, in California, we are working through it, learning along the way. Currently, we are working on the agreements, both the agreement that's required in the package that we have to submit to USDA FNS, and then data sharing agreements across multiple agencies here in the state of Michigan. We have the IPOM filled out, but it has been decided that both agencies, so both the Department of Education and our Department of Health and Human Services, will both do separate FNS 366As. So we are both working through our budgets, communicating, that is huge. That's a lot of this. And our conversations this week are what's next with communication plans. So I know we just at the department this past weekend, we had a conference with our school nutrition professionals, and we did a listening session specific to summer EBT. And the biggest takeaway is that we will not be able to communicate enough, both at the state and local level, to our school administrators, just to make sure they understand the process, but then also the families, the parents, making sure they know in the summertime where they need to go to with our Department of Health and Human Services to get any sort of information once we start rolling out those cards next summer. So again, partnerships, it's huge here in the state of Michigan, and it's been part of why we were so successful with pandemic EBT, and hopefully why this will work as smoothly as I'm maybe naively optimistic that it'll work at least this first year. But you can go on to the next slide. So those partnerships. So our Department of Health and Human Services is the lead agency. The Department of Education will be the partner agency. That said, we have a third agency that owns our student level data here in the state of Michigan, and that is the Center for Educational Performance and Information. So it's really a 3-agency partnership to make this all work. At the local level, the schools will process applications. They historically have been, process direct certification, and that information is reported in collections to the Center of Education and Performance Information 3 times a year. So our plan for this coming year is to use our spring collection, and that way we will be able to get the cards out. We're meeting almost weekly, if not multiple times a week, as we can, to have conversations. And we're also planning at some point after the final rule comes out, we're going to just do a day-long, I call it retreat, but it's really just a strategic plan, make sure everybody's got everything in order and just ready to roll out the program next spring. Next slide. So for summer 2024, we will utilize the streamlined certification. And then we are also going to use that flexibility to use our alternate income applications here in the state of Michigan. So one thing with the Center for Education Performance and Information, the student data system at the state level is called the Michigan Student Data System. And like I was saying, all local school districts have to submit data 3 times a year, and that is for public schools. Our non-public schools have a collection within the center as well, but it's not as, the requirements are different for our non-pub schools. But regardless, both collections collect free and reduced eligibility data. They always have. It's part of the collection process. It's that data is used in Michigan to pay. We have state aid payments that go out for economically disadvantaged students, and they use that free and reduced indicator within the collections, for the students to determine that state aid. So we're able to use that. It's called the supplemental nutrition eligibility. It historically is always collected free and reduced paper applications, and it actually, our system is robust enough that it's the same system that does the direct certification matching at the state level. So if a student ends up directly certified, then they're automatically tagged at the state level as eligible for what we call supplemental nutrition eligibility. And then if a student is free based on an application or an alternate income application, the local level, they have to submit that information, but it ends up being the same flag. Maybe that's a little bit more technical than we needed to get into, but I wanted to point that out because it's important to me. It's one of the things that this system, our Michigan Student Data System, has been around for almost 20 years. And it's really what set us up in Michigan to roll out pandemic EBT well. And then now hopefully it will help with summer EBT, at least when we're dealing with those free and reduced applications and direct cert kits. Next slide. So for summer 2025, we are in the very early conversations working on a state level application that will be housed within our Michigan Department of Health and Human Services My Bridges assistance application platform. So it is where citizens in Michigan can go and apply for any sort of assistance. We're very early. That's really all I can say. We have a lot of work to do over the next year or so to get that ready. So we're kind of, at this point, we're running like summer 2024 is kind of one path, and then we're having a summer 2025 in another path. The way our budget cycle works here in the state of Michigan, we have actually already submitted on my side, we have submitted a budget proposal to work with fiscal year 2025 and to cover what's to come with the heavier lift when we have to roll out that state level application. Our budget for 2024 is already done. Fortunately, at the Department of Ed, we do have general fund dollars. That's just how it's been, that have covered staff within the Department of Ed. So those of us that are working on these summer EBT, having these conversations, doing this work, we're able to cover ourselves with general fund until we're able to finally start getting some of the SEBT admin funding in from the USDA. So that is all I had.
All right, thank you so much, Melanie. We have lots of questions that have come in, but there are a few things that I would like to go over. Stephen, if you could go to the next slide. So we are at FRAC have put together quite a few materials that will answer a lot of the general questions that are in the chat. So we have a guide to summer EBT eligibility, as well as some explanations of some of the administrative costs pieces, and we have the California example of how they built it into their budget. That's all written out in that link. We also have a one-pager if you're struggling with your state, thinking that and they have the narrative that the two programs, the summer nutrition programs and summer EBT, are playing off of each other. We have an explanation as to why that is not the case and why they are complementary programs. So that also is up there for your use. I also wanted to state that USDA did put out a press release earlier today that 10 states have officially, submitted interest in running the program. This is not all of them, all of the states that we know of, but it is, a good group. And they have also reopened the Medicaid Direct Cert RFP. So if your state does not participate in Medicaid Direct Cert, that is something to be advocating for at the state level. This can help with the summer EBT enrollment process, because those kids will then be directly certified for free reduced price school meals, and they can be utilized, that data can be utilized to get them summer EBT benefits. A couple of questions came in about eligibility, and I do want to flag that we have an eligibility webinar coming up in about a month that will explain eligibility more in depth, and we will have people from USDA to explain the eligibility for the summer EBT program. So I will put the link to that webinar in the chat. It will also be included when we send out the follow-up for this webinar. I want to thank all of our panelists, and we're going to turn to questions. So one of the questions, a couple of the questions were more general, so I will answer them and then I'll get into the more specific ones. So students who are not directly certified but are on reduced lunch via income application, so I assume that is a free reduced price meal application. What do they need to do to get summer EBT? Nothing. They are automatically eligible if they have a certified free reduced price meal application submitted to their school. USDA is tracking what states decide to opt in. However, I don't know at this point if they will be making that public like they did with pandemic EBT. And the last question I'll answer is, how is the lead agency decided upon for administering summer EBT benefits? Is it up to the state? Yes, the state can designate whether Department of Social Services or the Department of Education, wherever their child nutrition agency, which of those agencies will be in charge of the program. They just have to outline the which department is responsible for what in their administrative and management plans that are due in February. So those are just some of the general questions. So I have a question for Melanie. Are you utilizing SNAP outreach partners in your outreach? Also curious on any tips on how to explain the full spectrum of available summer programs.
So, like I said, communication, the plan in and of itself, we have not, and I confirmed with my partners at DHHS that they haven't gotten into communication much. But it occurred to me, one of the things that's really exciting about summer EBT and our plan, and full disclosure, pandemic EBT here in Michigan, the cards, by the time we got them out, it was a lot of times September for the summer version. And because we're adjusting the timeline back and using spring collection, I'm optimistic we'll get the cards out in June, July. And I'm really excited because I hope long-term that means that we can, yes, utilize those partners, but also promote farmers markets and, getting families to buy local produce using this card. We're a big farm to program state. We have 10 cents a meal here in Michigan. We really want our programs to use local agriculture. So I'm hoping that at some point we get to a place where that is just part of this. It may take us a couple of years, but we'll get there. What was the second part?
What methods are you utilizing to explain the full spectrum of available summer programs?
We do utilize a contractor to help with communication plans. We have done that the last couple of years. Our Michigan school meals, if you're following, we are one of the universal meal states, and we have a Michigan school meals. The campaign started last year, and that's then what we use to market our universal meals here in Michigan. So that same company that helped us with that campaign, we may tap into them to kind of structure that narrative on using summer food, using non-congregate, using the summer EBT. But I think we have some work to go on that. So be looking at other states and what they're doing as well.
I think I have one more for Michigan. Are you including additional administrative funding for processing applications at the school level?
Currently, that is not in our plan, because those applications are both the free and reduced and the alternate, which here in Michigan, they're called education benefits forms. It's already part of the practice we're a long time CEP school, also expanding CEP, and we have, always promoted that general fund from the school district should be used to process those education benefits forms. But the other piece to it too is the big lift is already done here in the state of Michigan, making sure that kids have those applications in by actually our fall count day. So at this point now.
Question for California. The automation budget for summer EBT portion went by pretty fast. How much was California going to budget for this?
Hi, good question. We're at 45 million, so that I believe that's 22.5 general fund and 22.5 Fed. So we're gauging that off of our PEBT costs for summer, I believe, of 2023.
Thank you. We had a general question. Can state expenses for administrative expenses be supported in whole or in part through private sector funds? So it is FRAC's understanding that private dollars are able to be used. We do not obviously have that guidance fully out yet, so can't say 100% for sure, but it is our understanding at this point that private sector dollars could be used to support this program. Another question for Michigan. Will the household information report be used in Michigan for CEP schools?
Yes, so that is currently this year we rebranded it to the education benefit form, but last year it was the household information report, and that is those two titles are what we consider the alternate income form that USDA is given that 1 year to use those forms and the data from those forms.
Well, thank you. We had a question. Any news about the final guidance from USDA? The timing isn't ideal in that intents are due by January 1st, but guidance isn't expected until December. That is very true, and there is no update on when interim final guidance will be put out for sure. We don't believe it will come out until the expected end of December date. The timing is not ideal, and we have expressed that to USDA, and they are aware of that. And if there are questions that states have, they are able to go to USDA or the regional offices and ask those questions. If there are many similar questions, they may consider putting out more guidance if possible, but until before the interim final rule. But at this point, we do not believe that any more guidance will be coming out until that IFR is released. Can staff in kind time be eligible to help meet the administrative match? Any thoughts on this from the panelists?
That's a good question. I really don't have the answer for that, and maybe we can take that forward, honestly.
Yeah, that is a good question. We can hold on to that and bring that up at a higher level. All right, it looks like those are all of the questions that we have. If you have further questions, feel free obviously to reach out to any of the panelists or myself. I just want to wrap up by saying that this program is incredibly important. Summer is the hungriest time of year for students, and running the program in 2024 will ensure continuity between the pandemic EBT program and the summer EBT program. It is a challenge. States have been facing these types of administrative challenges during the pandemic EBT program, and now they face them with the summer EBT program. But for the families that need these benefits, it's incredibly vital that we help support them during this time of year. So, lessons learned from summer EBT demonstration projects, as well as pandemic EBT the pandemic EBT program, really just shows how much this program can help families and can help feed hungry kids, which is really important for continued learning for all of the students in this country. So thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you to all of our panelists for all of your insight. Really appreciate everything that has been said today, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day and has a wonderful rest of your week. Again, reach out if you have any questions. Thank you for all of your time. Have a wonderful day, everyone.